some bold announcements from the government at the beginning of the week. 9 policy targets that they said, hey, here's 9 things that we want to achieve by 2030. I had described them previously as 9 impossible things to do before breakfast, let alone by 2030. But all admirable goals, and certainly raising the bar in terms of some of the things that we want for our nation. Joining me on the program now is Ana Ika. She is a member of the team at the Salvation Army Social Policy and Parliamentary Unit. Ana, kia ora talofa. Thank you for joining us today.
Morena, Andrew, thanks for having me.
These 9 things, I mean, firstly, they're all good things, right? From the Salvation Army's point of view, if the government managed to achieve even close to these targets, New Zealand would be a better place. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in our view, these targets are something that we are really, I guess, yeah, we're really excited to see this from the government. Shoot for the moon and you aim amongst the stars.
Yeah.
Like we do think these targets are pretty out there, but it does show that the government, this government particularly has provided, I guess, a benchmark of where they want to be
Yep.
In 6 years, and so it gives us like a ground to be able to advocate, to be able to keep the government accountable towards something, which are these targets that they've put in place.
Now, accountability is a very good thing, and of course, the government, or any government, is accountable to the electorate every 3 years currently. There have been some comments that this is a little bit too corporate. This is a little bit too. Sorry, Christopher, your former CEO life is showing here. And we've seen this before from National, of course, under the John Key government. It's all KPIs and corporate measures and those sorts of things. Some criticism that, hey, we're a country, we're not a business. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that rhetoric is coming out, particularly with this government and the different targets they've been putting out, the different plans that they've been putting out in regards to what they're trying to achieve as a government.
Yeah.
But I think regardless of the jargon that they're using, I think that the underlying thing that we need to be able to look at is what is this, regardless of what language they're using, and the important thing that we need to be looking at is are they actually actioning what they're saying that they're going to do? And yeah, like I said previously, Andrew, it's about, like, now that they've put these targets out, if it is corporate jargon or not, it still is, for us, those numbers, those targets have families behind them, they have communities behind them. And so it gives us an avenue to be able to keep them accountable. And so we're glad that they're putting targets on issues and challenges that we're seeing come through our front doors. And so that's something that, we have to roll with the punches, regardless of whether it's corporate jargon or normal jargon, whatever that is.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I'm sure as the Salvation Army, I mean, you guys have targets, you have aspirational goals, you measure your success against the things that you hope to achieve. I mean, this isn't just corporate, this happens within the charitable sector as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I look at like our unit's job, the social policy unit, and when we're speaking to different communities, ultimately our job here, the policy unit, is to make the entire Salvation Army redundant. Like not the church side, because I think we always need the gospel, we always need the church until Christ returns. But in regards to the social services, I mean, if we could build a society that has policies and legislations that mean we don't need food banks, that mean we don't need housing, that means that everyone's able to stand on their own 2 feet, and then I think that's we want to work towards a society where you don't need our social services. And so absolutely.
Now, it sounds like you've got even higher aspirational goals than the government in that regard. But hey, so we should within the kingdom of God. Are these achievable? Are these just things that you think that the government will be able to say, okay, here are our targets, this is what we want to reduce, we want to reduce this by this percentage, etc.? Or is it a little bit pie in the sky? Is it sort of like, well, this will distract us from some of the policies we don't like so much because they're trying to do these good things over here? Is it a little bit of a distraction from what essentially are unrealistic targets? What's your thoughts?
I think if we're looking at these targets in regards to a destination, I think all of us as a society have the same destination as what these targets are trying to achieve. I think the challenge is, Andrew, is when we're looking at how we get there,
Yeah.
is what are we going to do in how we achieve this. And I think looking deeper at the different policies that they've been able to push out so far, around like sanctions for beneficiaries,
Mm-hmm.
around we saw incremental increases in minimum income levels like a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
I think if we're looking at the direction that this government is taking to be able to achieve these targets, in our view, it is a bit pie in the sky, because
Yep.
we don't. I think a lot of the policies that they're pushing through, particularly in regards to welfare and looking at job seeker support, they've it's one mold fits everybody, but working in our space and working with the families that we support, that it's often not that straightforward.
Yeah.
And it's a lot more complex than that, and you need to have targeted approaches, and different you need to have different approaches as well to be able to support our communities. If we did take some of these graphs that of these targets, and we did break it down in regards to different communities, if we did break it down to different ethnicities, then that those targets, then those graphs would be look a lot different. And I guess the decline for some communities would be significantly steeper, as it is for, I guess, just looking at New Zealand in general. And so it is a bit pie in the
Yeah.
sky.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that we don't try, because I think that's one thing that we need to be able to do, is be hopeful, regardless of like how bad all of these numbers are looking.
Now, something I very much appreciate about the Social Policy Unit of the Salvation Army is that I know you guys will keep the government accountable if they've said, hey, this is what we're aiming for, particularly with the research that you guys do. You're going to be holding their feet to the flame, as it were, on this one. And in some way, the government has helped you in this regard in saying, hey, this is what we want to achieve. Hey, roll on the next few years, and we certainly hope the government achieves them, but you guys will hold them accountable. Wanting to focus today on the policy areas in particular that affect youth and rangatahi in New Zealand, because we certainly can't get through all 9 in our conversation this morning. But when it comes to youth offending, I mean, reducing youth offending is an admirable target, but not necessarily through boot camps and criminalising young people. I mean, the targets are one thing, but the policies stated so far seem to be pushing in the opposite direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like, from a former youth worker, Andrew, I was in the youth work scene for over a decade, and so one of the things that was quite prevalent when I was in the youth work scene was that there was a lot of support in wraparound for young people, which is awesome, and we really that's very much needed. But the challenge there, particularly with young people who are at risk, or young people that are high offenders, is that they come from quite broken families, they come from broken homes, they come from not a lot of support in the homes. And so the challenge there then is, if we're taking these young people out, we're putting them in boot camps for a year, and we which doesn't have a lot of evidence to show that form of rehabilitating young people works. And then we're putting them back into the same environment, we're putting them back into the same communities. And so we're just putting these young people back into the same setting in which we picked them up from. And so then that often ends up that these young people will end up back into square one, where they originally started, and back on the street and back offending again. And so it's a matter of how do we support these young people, and also support the family as well, to be able to lift them up from some of the challenges that they face in society. So in regards to being able to achieve the youth offending targets, I think it's really admirable. I think what we need to do is we need to look at what happened previously, and that was a restorative route. That was a restorative route that the justice system had taken in regards to youth offending and providing alternative approaches. And I think we need to learn from the areas that we have succeeded in the past. I mean, if you do have time and look at the graph, there was a significant decline in the past 10 years, and that was often because there was a restorative approach in regards to youth justice that did work. And so it's a matter of how do we learn from our previous mistakes, and also how do we learn from the areas that we've yeah, that we've succeeded in, and that's often because we took a restorative approach with youth justice in New Zealand, and that's why those numbers had declined
So, I
significantly.
mean, if the government wants to hit their targets, they're going to need to look at evidence-based, okay, what's worked in the past. If we want to hit these targets, let's have policies that have a good track record rather than just locking in an ideological viewpoint. Although complexities of a coalition government, of course, some of these policies have come in under the coalition agreement. So it's going to be a tricky one to negotiate for the coalition government.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can't necessarily take the challenge with this is that there's not just one policy in play. Like
Yep.
I think there's challenges around trying to get young people off job seeker support
Mm-hmm.
or trying to restrict youth benefit payments. And all of those different factors all play together to impact or to become a precursor as to why young people often find themselves in high deprivation levels and low education outcomes. And that in turn will make them more prone to a life of
Yep.
crime. And so it's not just a matter of what we do in regards to the youth justice system, but what we do right across the youth sector as well. And how do we support young people?
Another aspect which certainly has some key measures against it is school attendance and achievement levels. Again, I suppose, yes, we want our young people back in school. Yes, we want them to have higher educational achievement so that they can get better jobs, so that they can stay out of trouble. All of these things are linked. Although David Seymour's policy announcement, which kind of feels like he's going to punish and fine parents for not sending kids to school, when a lot of these parents are just struggling to make ends meet and haven't got the money to pay the fines in the first place, again, doesn't sound like his admirable goals, but not necessarily effective strategies.
Yeah, I think that policy is a bit out of touch with reality. If you fine parents for their children not going to school, how are they going to pay for those fines? You're just going to put those families into a greater financial hardship. And so I don't think I don't think that's the right direction. I don't know if any of many countries who would do that to parents to fine them for their children not attending school. I think it's a matter of wrapping around that family, the schools wrapping around that family and being able to support young people back into education, because the numbers are quite shocking, Andrew.
Yep.
It's 45.9% of students that are attending a school term for 90% or more. And so those numbers are quite shocking for New Zealand. And so there needs to be work done there. But in regards to the approach that David Seymour has suggested, that's just not going to work, and that's not going to improve. Punitive measures in regards to education is not going to do much in regards to wanting students to be able to engage well in education. And so
I think that's something
there's a lot of work that needs to be done there.
It's something we've certainly learnt as a society, that in education, if children aren't doing well at school, then whipping them isn't going to improve their educational outcomes. And essentially, this is what the government is doing with parents. But honestly, I suppose good on the government for saying, hey, we've got all these areas where we're looking at a C- or a D. We want to be A+ in all of these areas and within a finite period of time. Some good aspirational goals, and hey, power to them, but they're going to need to look at strategies that actually work rather than a particular ideological framework that they perhaps are stuck behind. Hey, as I mentioned, I know that you and the team will hold them accountable to this. Thanks for what you do. Thanks for joining us today. Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.